Welcome again. I am here once more with Dr. Odell. We started last week talking about breast cancer. And the reason we're talking about breast cancer, not only because it's a fascinating subject and certainly touches many families out there, but I was literally blown away by Dr. Odell's book called Breast Cancer, The Rest of the Story. And just recently, I found out that Dr. Odell and I have something in common. We both went into medicine because of loss of our loved ones very early in our lives. So, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back again.
Great. So, let's talk about, as I mentioned, what made you go into medicine?
Well, at the time I was working in a hospital and as like an orderly, back when they had orderlies. And I was in the emergency room and then later on into respiratory therapy. And I was really kind of disenchanted with what was there. It just wasn't me. It didn't feel like that's something that I wanted to do the rest of my life. My mother became ill. She had lung cancer and then developed brain cancer. And so I was taking care of her, going to school and working in the hospital. I decided after her passing that I wanted to study natural medicine, that this would be a better road for me. And so that's really what took me into it. I was already in the medical world a little bit, working in the hospital, but I was just on the wrong path for me. And that's when I decided that naturopathy would be the best direction, and then later on, traditional Chinese medicine.
So let's talk about breast cancer prevention. I'm a firm believer that, like most diseases, breast cancer is a preventable disease. I'm sure you share that opinion.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not talking about 100%, but even if we move the dial just a little bit,
Right.
We're talking about millions of lives and families and everybody else who is affected by this.
Yes.
As far as prevention, as I was going through your book, it's just filled with all sorts of interesting and valuable information. Let's talk about medicinal mushrooms.
Okay. Well, there's medicinal mushrooms are something that people use immunologically to boost their immune system, but some of them are also anti-cancerous as well. Usually, I use medicinal mushrooms when a person has been diagnosed with breast cancer. Not so much as just a regular preventative for everyone, or if a person's becoming chronically ill, like with flus and different kinds of organisms, and just to kind of get their immunity up. So those types of medicinal mushrooms I use immunologically. However, there is another one. It's called Agaricus bisporus. And Agaricus bisporus is your button mushroom. It's the kind that's commonly found in a grocery store, the little white button mushrooms that they put on pizzas. That particular mushroom has a unique property because it's a natural aromatase inhibitor. It's a natural AI. Now, without the side effects of the pharmaceutical AIs, I might add. So what a person could do is they could, if they're not allergic to mushrooms, of course, if mushrooms are okay and on their list of foods to eat, then they could take these button mushrooms. Of course, you buy them organic, and you chop them up, and usually about a fourth of a cup to a half of a cup every other day or so as a preventative, just to help the person in balance their estrogen and their testosterone. And so what an AI does is aromatase is the enzyme that breaks testosterone into estrogen. So an AI inhibitor prevents that from happening. It keeps testosterone upstream so it doesn't convert into estrogen. So this is a natural AI that can be used preventatively. Some of the other mushrooms that I speak about in the book as I say, are more immunologic. You have Ganoderma, Maitake, there's, of course, Shiitake, there's Coriolis, and there's another type of agaricus. It's a Brazilian agaricus, Brazil. And those mushrooms, again, are highly immunologic. They're wonderful to take, and you could pulse them. And what that means is you wouldn't have to take them all the time, but maybe you take it for 3-4 weeks and then stop, and then wait a little while and take it again for 3-4 weeks. So you could pulse these types of immunological mushrooms off and on. And that will build up the immunity. There's another one I really like. Actually, there's quite a few good mushrooms out there, but cordyceps is a very useful mushroom. It grows in the highlands in China and into Tibet, and people have used this mushroom as for strength and stamina, really, but also immunologically. They live in the high altitude areas where there's not a lot of oxygen. The weather is very cold there, and the work is very hard. And they found that this particular mushroom gives them an endurance for that type of environment. It's an adaptogen. It helps them adapt to that harsh environment that they live in. Well, they've researched this particular mushroom, cordyceps, and they found that indeed it has different types of mucopolysaccharides that are highly immunologic. So that's another one that can be taken as well. I describe each of these mushrooms in the book, and I do think that they're all very helpful. But particularly the AI, the Agaricus bisporus is a useful one for people that are even looking for a natural AI. Maybe they've already been diagnosed with cancer, and they're looking for something that's natural because they couldn't tolerate the pharmaceutical, or they chose not to take the pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm. And what's the traditional Chinese medicine approach to breast cancer?
There's, Chinese medicine is very individualized, and so it depends on the person's what they call pattern of disharmony or pattern of illness. If it's maybe something to do with their liver and is causing a disturbance within their body, or it could be something to do with their stomach and spleen. So you have to decide or determine the pattern of illness. Once you've determined that, then there's specific protocols for that. In my book, I have a little section, it's like a whole chapter actually, on traditional Chinese medicine approach to breast cancer. And there's a lot of different formulas in there, and it can be kind of confusing. So I think it's important for people to seek out a practitioner, of course, that's versed in this, and that can take their pulses, look at their tongue, evaluate them in a traditional way, as well as with laboratory medicine and other tools that we have at our disposal now. And so it's good to have a practitioner that blends, the old world and the new world, and determines really what would be the most appropriate formulation for them. Usually it's a formula that in some way clears the blood. What I mean by that, it'll help to clear the lymph, maybe some lymphatic type herbs, but also they benefit the liver and improve the biliary function of the liver so the person can detoxify faster. And sometimes we use these, the mushrooms, the medicinal mushrooms, or other types of immunological herbs to boost the immunity as well. So it's mostly detoxification, clearing, and immune boosting types of herbs and protocols.
I want to talk about the big thing, the terrain.
Yes.
What do we do with terrain? How do we approach this, and how do we kind of balance the terrain?
Yes. Well, when my thought is the terrain is twofold. There's a physical terrain, and we think of it as a biochemical terrain, and then there's also a more of an energetic or even a psycho-emotional terrain, a non-physical terrain, if you will. So we have the physical and the non-physical. Most of the time when we talk about terrain, we're talking about the physical terrain and about pH, about the microbiome of the gut or the oral microbiome, and about detoxification of organs. And so if everything is working well, if the person isn't too acidic, if their liver and kidneys and other organs of detoxification are working well, if they have a healthy microbiome, then all that is good. But if not, then those things need to be fixed. And that's an important consideration. In Chinese medicine, back to that, the breast lies along the stomach meridian. And so often is the case, there will be what we think of as a stomach spleen meridian theme. And so it's important in some way to work with the gastrointestinal terrain. Mm-hmm. And as I say, this may involve taking probiotics. It may involve dietary changes. Usually it involves both of those things. And but there's other terrain clearing and cleansing things we can do too. As we know, the terrain becomes very toxic. As we take in toxins into our body from the environment, or maybe there are our own bodily toxins that haven't been eliminated, they get sequestered away within our connective tissue matrix. So this is to say that the extracellular space between the cells, in other words, the space between the cells, is kind of a depository for acids and waste and toxins. And so this is also the cellular terrain, the tissue terrain, the mesenchyme as we call it. And it's important that this is cleared and cleansed as well. So it's not just organ detox. There needs to be lymphatic and matrix detox.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about detoxification, what do you think about ozone therapy?
I think ozone has had a lot of potential in helping people, particularly with infectious diseases, clearly. You know, ozone is a disinfectant, and many cities throughout the world, Moscow, Buenos Aires, other places, big cities, use ozone to disinfect their water. Mm-hmm. And so it can do the same thing to the blood. It can disinfect the blood from various types of organisms that are pathogenic. It also has a unique potential as an antioxidant, even though we know that ozone is an oxidant, it's O3. But interestingly enough, it seems to activate antioxidant systems in the body. And so if a person has a lot of oxidative stress and they undergo ozone treatment, often that reduces their oxidative stress. So it's a cleanser, it's in the big picture, it's an antioxidant. I think it's very useful as a therapy. There's also ionized oxygen too. I know when I was in Europe recently, there was a couple of booths that were displaying this, and it looked very promising, this type of oxygenation to the body. A lot of it is about oxygenation, and so that's why exercise and other things are important for us to really get that aerobic oxygenation or deep breathing into our tissues.
What about nutrition? I realize it's a huge subject, but there's always a big controversy, let's say, about soy and soy products.
Okay.
What's your take on that?
Okay, well, let me get to soy here in a second. With nutrition, generally speaking, I have found that erring on the side of a plant-based diet for people that want to prevent disease is usually a better direction to go. Plants are easier to digest. As we get older, we can't maybe properly digest complex animal proteins. And so generally a plant-based diet is going to be healthier. Also, a diet that's low in sugars is going to be healthier too. Now, many people have food sensitivities, and it's probably worthwhile to get those checked out to find out which foods a person should eliminate and gravitate towards. But another single most important thing to do with diet is eat organically. And this is, I think, one of the main causes for breast cancer and a lot of cancers is just our environment has become so toxically loaded with insecticides and fungicides that our body can't deal with it. We can't eliminate this fast enough. So eating, if as much as you could afford to, eating an organic diet, I think, is really important. As far as soy goes, soy's been used traditionally in countries for centuries. There does seem to be a benefit eating fermented soy. Okay, fermented soy. That's like miso or tempeh. And when you ferment soy, in some ways you reconstitute the proteins, rearrange the proteins. It makes it easier to digest. It's easier on the gut. There's less problems with digestion with it. And I think that this is actually beneficial, that fermented soy. But eating a lot of soy that's not fermented, like tofu and soy milk, that's a little questionable. A person may actually have a soy allergy, which is pretty common. Soy is heavily GMO'd, and much of that is questionable. So if you're eating soy, make sure you get it organic, make sure that it's fermented, and you're probably going to be safe with it if you do those two things.
Iodine, seaweed?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking. Well, this is, I think, a very important thing for everyone is we don't get enough minerals and from the land. Our soil is grossly depleted in minerals. And so many of the micro minerals and trace minerals just aren't there anymore in the earth. And really, a plant only needs nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in order to be green and healthy. But we need anywhere from 60 to 90 minerals. A lot of them are unpronounceable, and not even, people don't even know about them. But they're important in some biochemical pathway. And we can get these minerals from the ocean. So we can get them from seaweed. There's dulse, there's kelp, there's many kinds of seaweed. This is a wonderful thing to bring into a person's diet. We think of them as sea vegetables, not really weeds. But this is a good thing because it also carries iodine. And there's lots of research that has shown that iodine is very protective to the breast. And that as long as you have a diet that is adequate in iodine, you're less likely to get breast cancer. That it seems some of the research points to the fact that iodine is important to create estriol, E3, which is your protective estrogen. So this, I think, is a very, very useful mineral that you can get from seaweed. Another one that's really useful is selenium. And there's a lot of studies that have shown that selenium depletion can be a co-cause, I should say, of cancers, certainly of breast cancers too. Which brings us into another arena of supplementation, I guess. One of the other things that I think is really important is vitamin D. And that there's a lot of research out there showing that people that are deficient in vitamin D do develop cancers. So another possible co-cause of cancers is low vitamin D. Only recently have MDs really been starting to check for D levels. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the lab ranges still are, from 30 up. But an ideal range of a 25 hydroxy vitamin D would be 50 or above. So I think you're really wanting to get it kind of in the middle or a little bit higher up. And usually a person has to supplement with quite a bit of D to do that. But you have to measure it along the way and monitor it, making sure you're not getting too much. But generally, people are deficient in this, just like they're deficient in iodine. Iodine is probably one of the most commonly deficient minerals in the world. And that there's areas that people develop goiters, as you know, because they lack iodine. In the United States, that was why they added iodine to salt, because of the goiter situation.
Yeah, and never mind minerals like magnesium.
Of course. Well, we could talk about minerals this whole time, but these are, again, minerals that just aren't in our earth anymore. Some people that grow flowers know that if you add magnesium to a garden, that it makes the flowers look more beautiful. but generally they're not adding magnesium to our crops that we eat. And so we can get deficient in it. And it is a very important mineral for more than 100 different enzyme systems in the body.
I'm personally convinced that when it comes to breast cancer, the genetic component is very, very minimal, because we know that when they compared Asian women who live in Shanghai versus same Asian women genetically who live in San Francisco, after 2 or 3 generations, the ones that live in San Francisco have 7 times the amount of breast cancer as women who live in Shanghai.
Yes.
Again, Asian women do eat probably more sea vegetables.
Yes.
And consume more soy.
Yeah, fermented soy, yes.
Right. And they're generally kind of slimmer than
yes.
North American women. So this
more physically active, perhaps.
Yeah, probably.
You know, riding bicycles and walking to work and things like this. I think that's a factor. Yeah, the culture is just a lot different. Their diet is totally different, as you're saying, and they come here, and after a few generations, it's the same incidence. So when you look at that, obviously it's not genetics. You know, this is an environmental impact that in some ways, it's epigenetics, if you will. But I think that the idea that genetics is a big player is wrong. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of money is being spent in cancer research is on genetics, when it would probably better be spent in looking at environmental impact on us, not just from our food, but as I say, from cosmetics and other types of things that we breathe and become in contact with.
When it comes to nutrition, can you suggest to someone how to use estrogen regularly?
Well, yeah, estrogen, if a person chooses to take estrogen, I think that choice needs to be decided between them and their physician, and they need to have a really good reason to take estrogen. Because estrogen is a little bit like playing with fire. Now, testosterone and progesterone and some of the other hormones like DHEA, which is another androgen, or pregnenolone, these carry less dangers, though they can convert to estrogen, but generally it's not as dangerous as taking a prescriptive estrogen. So the first question really is, do you need it? Is it worth the risk? And is there some alternative way of getting the estrogens up? And sometimes that may be trying to get the androgens up, because we know androgens convert to estrogen. That would be your testosterone or DHEA, or using some pregnenolone. In other words, using some kind of substance, some kind of steroidal hormone upstream to break into estrogen and progesterone. The other thing that I caution people about is taking estrogen solo. That I think that's what's called unopposed estrogen replacement therapy. And believe it or not, there are still doctors that say, well, because you don't have a uterus, you don't need progesterone. You could just take the estrogen by itself. This is very dangerous advice, in that progesterone is a regulatory hormone, and it regulates estrogens and androgens. It regulates the thyroid hormone. It regulates a lot of things in the body. It's always important. It'll always be important in a person's life, males and females. But this, I think, is dangerous to take estrogen without progesterone, generally. It's also dangerous to take estrogen without monitoring it. I know we talked about that last time. I think it's really important to monitor it. So it's a very individual thing, between them and their physician, and they really have to decide, is it necessary to take prescriptive estrogen? If so, to monitor it, and if so, to make sure that it's together with progesterone. It's not it's opposed with progesterone.
Are there foods that you would consider estrogenic or progestogenic?
Yams are progestogenic. Yams are. And we know that in cultures that live off of yams, like in South America, that generally women have fairly high progesterone levels. And so it's the diosgenin in the yam that can convert to progesterone. So yes, I think yams are very protective and can be a very good progestogenic food. As far as estrogen goes, there are herbs that people use to boost their estrogen. And of course, black cohosh being probably the most well-known of them. There's also others. There's Vitex, which is chasteberry. Vitex works at a pituitary level to increase luteinizing hormone over follicle stimulating hormone. And so when you're increasing luteinizing hormone, you're increasing progesterone. And so it balances the hormones out from a pituitary level. There's a lot of other herbs that people put together in Chinese medicine. Most of them in some way are for circulation, just general circulation to the reproductive organs. As we know, our circulation slows down, our nitric oxide becomes depleted, and this affects our organs of reproduction for both males and females. And so there are other substances that can help to get nitric oxide up. Beets are very good to get nitric oxide up. Eating beets regularly, eating them then in a salad or boiling them as a soup is a very good way to get beets in your diet. If you don't like beets too much, you could always get a beet powder and take it as a drink. This is another way, but that will help to get the nitric oxide up to improve circulation to the organs that are making the hormones.
Good for cardiovascular health as well.
Yeah.
And
right. Yes, exactly.
Elimination.
Yeah. Some people go so far as to taking arginine. Arginine creates nitric oxide. And so there's arginine powders too that can be very useful as well.
Nitric oxide is also known as an adaptogen, kind of a
yes, exactly. That nitric oxide is a very unique molecule, and it helps to open and close blood vessels. So it's a regulatory type of messenger molecule, and so it is very important to the circulatory system, and it seems to even balance blood pressure, as well as in decreasing plaque in the arteries. So it's an important molecule.
Speaking about plaque, let's talk about the oral dental connection again.
Yes.
Because very few people pay attention to this in conventional medicine. As I mentioned before, dentistry and medicine somehow got divorced.
Yes.
And the patient is like a baby in between two parents, left alone. Nobody's actually fighting for it. So what can we do to, or what would you say to empower people who are watching this as far as biological dentistry? What would you like them to do?
First and foremost, find a good biological dentist. And that just because a person is mercury-free doesn't necessarily mean they're a biological dentist. However, that's a good start. But as you know, when you get in there and start removing mercury amalgams, it has to be done in a very special way. The IAOMT has a protocol called the SAFE protocol. And it's important to find a biological dentist that is certified with this SAFE protocol. So if you're choosing to remove amalgams from the mouth, which is probably a good idea, because that will definitely over time reduce the mercury load, which the mercury is a big player in cancers as well as a lot of degenerative diseases, neurological diseases. So it's important though to remove these safely. so that you don't become contaminated. So that's one thing. Another thing too has to do with the oral microbiome. And that's like when we're talking about gum disease, gingivitis, and the like. This needs to be treated as well. This is because gum disease, these organisms can translocate to other organs in your body. In other words, they could migrate and cause heart disease or other kinds of problems in your organs. So getting a water pick, cleaning underneath the gum and on a regular basis, I think is very useful. There's also the idea of dead teeth, root canal treated teeth and cavitations. And this is where you would really need somebody that knows their stuff and in order to determine, what needs to be done. Some people are of the opinion that all dead teeth must go. And, I have seen dentists like this in Europe, whereas others will if they look at the mouth and they see 5 or 6 root canal treated teeth, they may decide that, well, let's just go for these 2 first and see how you do. But that's going to reduce the toxic load to the body by removing dead teeth, because there's no way to completely sanitize or sterilize a dead tooth. There's lateral canals and dental tubules which fill up with bacterium and funguses, and these over time can cause an infection in the jaw. You can get osteitis, osteonecrosis in the jaw. This can affect the neighboring teeth and the roots of the neighboring teeth, and before long you may have a full-blown jaw infection, which can really be nasty. But it's been shown that root canal treated teeth can be are associated with breast cancer. So it's important to consider this and consider what needs to be done, but make sure you're followed by a really good biological dentist that knows not only about safe amalgam removal, but about these other areas of gum disease and dead teeth and the like.
Any thoughts on implants?
Well, I heard a dentist once say, dentistry is the disease. And I think that is wise. What that means is everything a dentist does, and maybe not everything except for cleaning your teeth perhaps, has a compromise. It's a compromise. So for example, maybe you need a bridge, but they have to crown the teeth on either side to make a bridge. Well, when you crown a tooth, you weaken the tooth. So you're weakening 2 teeth in order to create a bridge. Many things follow like this. There's always compromises. And with dental implants, it's a compromise as well. There's have periodontal ligaments there to support the tooth structure, the implant structure. Pressure on is not healthy and can have maybe, again, osteonecrosis or something. Has to be healthy in order for there to be a successful implant. Use titanium. Zirconium it's a 20 periodic table if you want to look it up. It's a more biocompatible than is titanium, and it seems to bond to the bone. So you might have with titanium implants. So this is becoming popular. I think they're maybe in their 5th or 6th generation now, and people are so it just depends that if an implant is done correctly, it could be a good thing. It's better than having a dead.
Yeah, I understand that zirconia implants have been around a little longer in Europe than in North America. Maybe about 10 years ago or so, they slowly started migrating to North America, and now it's becoming kind of more popular with some biological dentists and with some patients as well. And there were certainly advantages and disadvantages to both materials. So how would you create a kind of a plan for prevention? what would you
Yes.
say the three most important things you would want a
Well,
person to?
something we haven't really talked about is a person's psycho-emotional state.
Hmm.
And I really think this is huge. And in my book, I give several chapters to a very important component. Get ill. It's important to have some kind of way to manage stress in your life, whether you meditate, whether you exercise, counseling, whatever it is, it's important to fix it. And a lot of stress for a long period of time. If a person has had a trauma, just push it under the rug. You have to deal with it. Generally, this means counseling, finding some. Usually, a family member may not be the best person. You may need a professional with the grief of it, the loss of it, or whatever has happened. But I think these two things are important right off the top. Finding a way to modulate stress and seeking counseling if there's some that we can't underplay this because stress, chronic stress, and weaken our immunity, and they can cause the terrain to become more toxic or physical. So I think of this as the psycho-emotional terrain. It needs to be cleared up too, and a person needs to feel empowered in some way by their community and they need to feel purposeful and have a directive in life. It's really important to have some kind of purpose, religion here or anything, but just to have some type of spirit, whatever that may be. And this gives a person a reason to live and helps them become a compassionate and caring individual. That's all really healthy, and it can benefit the person's health. So that would be the number one thing to do is, work on the psycho-emotional themes. The second thing, of course, there's a lot of ways to clean up the diet. And as we talked about, going plant-based, going incorporate special foods into the diet, whether it be beets or fermented soy, mushrooms and things like this. Turmeric is an spice that can be added to the mix as far as a spice and medicinal food. And then kind of exercise program on a regular basis. Something 300 minutes a week. That's about 45 minutes a day. And whether it be walking, cycling, swimming, other kinds of perhaps class work like yoga or Pilates. That's what I do personally, is I do anything to move around. We can't sit in one place too long. It's bad for our lymphatics. It's bad for our body. Our lymph moves because we move. Getting out and moving around, walking, this is, I'd say, the third probably most important thing. So we have the psycho-emotional, maybe the nutritional, and then the exercise component of it as well.
That's great. I want to thank you for the interview. I mean, I have a feeling that we can sit here and talk about things like that for hours, and not just
Exactly.
breast cancer. But I'd love to talk to you about bioregulatory medicine.
Yes. But I hope that you could go to the website, brmi.online. That's the Bioregulatory Medicine Institute's website. I'm their medical director. And we have a lot of free information. It's a library for people. So they can go there if they're interested in learning about ozone. We have many articles on ozone, or if hyperthermia or anything that they may have found in the book that they want to know a little bit more about. They can go to that website as a database and find out more information. We also publish an e-journal every other month, and it has interesting articles in it, and that's all free. It's an online e-journal. So please visit brmi.online, and also visit my website, which is breastcancertherestofthestory.com. It's all one word, breastcancertherestofthestory.com, and you could find information on this book. The as well as the preface is all there free, and you could read about it before you decide if that's something you want to purchase.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.